I am now in Budapest, Hungary, one of the last places where sovereignty, where common sense is still thriving. And what is the hallmark of a thriving nation? It is democracy. If you look behind me, you can see the national parliament. And that's the issue with Europe. Do we still have democracy? No. We're governed by unelected tyrants that are destroying us continent with mass migration, with open borders, with fraud, with corruption, and debts, a lot of debts. Europe, once the heartbeat of civilization, the continent that brought the best art, philosophers, buildings, thinkers, architectures, even democracy. We gave the Renaissance enlightenment, and where a good civilization would thrive, Europe now is in complete decay. I'm sitting here with Jim Ferguson, a true freedom fighter. Actually, you have a global movement full of freedom fighters putting out the word to fight for our freedom that we're losing to the globalists. Well, we're here to make a documentary about how to make Europe great again, and one of the issues that we're facing is Islamization. We're losing our Christian identity and roots. And according to you, do you believe that Europe can persevere its Christian roots now that Islam is rising so rapidly?
What I would say is that Christians have to be a little bit more serious about their faith. They've got to start opening the good book and they've got to start reading it and understanding that this is a spiritual war that we're in. It's not just political. It is at every strata, and there is a full multi-spectrum degree of warfare that's being waged against the people of Europe and indeed the world right now. I actually do believe that there is such a thing as Christian revival. In fact, to be honest with you, Scarlett, I've seen so many people in the freedom movement who are actually Christians and they're strong in their faith, like you, like many of the other people we met in Romania.
Is mass migration being used as a tool to change the demographics in Europe?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I think we've all been witnessing the mass psychological operations that's been taking place against us. We've been getting told these are asylum seekers fleeing war. That's just not true at all. It's not women and children. If it was a real war zone they were fleeing from, I would be putting the women and children first. I'd be staying back to fight for my country. That's not what's happening. These are young, predominantly male men, males, aged between 19 and 30. They have no identity, no empathy with the host nations. They're not here for good reasons. And many of them, unfortunately, are radical Muslims. So we have to understand that the enemy is now within. And it is almost like a standing army that we're seeing in France and Germany and Norway and Sweden. And Sweden has become the rape capital of Europe. It's quite disgusting. There are daily shootings. There are bombings going on in Sweden. Of all places, who would have thought we would ever see the day where such chaos would be ensuing? But there is a way to fight back. There is a way. And you know, it's not that hard. What we must do is unite the people of Europe.
Is that the way to make Europe great again?
We need to make Europe great again because Europe is great. We need to make it great again. We need to recapture the spirit of passion and truth and freedom and unite the peoples of the world. And I know exactly how to do it.
Well, how?
Well, first of all, we have to become united, truly united. The way to do that is accept that we might not always agree with different policies or different political decisions. And we have to also remember that history itself goes back many thousands of years. There have been many conflicts. The English attacked the Scots attacked the English. There was the Highland clearances. We never forget our history. The Romanians, the Hungarians. It's an ancient history. But what's incredibly important is that we don't forget that rich history, but we put it aside because we have now got a common enemy and they're called globalists. And if we don't unite and overcome that, then it's going to be more of a challenge. But you know, when you focus on the things that unite us, that bind us together, that is what makes the magic happen.
And a important part of that is being patriotic. Because if you forget your heritage, you forget where you come from, then you are dealt in the hands of the globalists. What they're trying to do is for us to forget who we are, for us not to have our identity, through our woke ideology, through this transnationalism. In your words, what does it mean for you to be a patriot?
Patriots are people that love their countrymen and women. They love their countries. They love the national flags. It doesn't matter what country we're talking about. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what color you are, where you're from. It doesn't matter. If you're a patriot, you respect other patriots. The Irish patriots that I speak to respect the English patriots. The English patriots respect the Irish and the Canadian and the American patriots. We must all stand united, shoulder to shoulder, overcoming those little differences that are there or maybe historical. And when we do that, we're going to see a much more powerful movement moving forward. And what we're doing in Freedom International, our primary mission is to unite the patriots of the world together. And we're having a lot of success at that. But we have to get out with the people. We have to come to these countries. We have to speak to the people involved, people like yourself in the Netherlands, people in Romania, people in Hungary, all over the world. And when we do that, we can explain why it's so important to unite. And when we do that, we will be in a position to fight back against these globalists who are frankly declaring war on humanity itself. That's how serious it is.
That's a very clear message. So patriotism is the dawn of the golden age, and we're in the age of patriotism right now. Thank you so much, Tim.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
So what can we actually learn from this civilization that is still maintaining its sovereignty, that has a leader that stands up against the tyranny of Brussels? And I really wanted to hear it from the people themselves. I've been walking around already for an hour and a half. Unfortunately, no one wants to give a real statement on camera, but what the people have been telling me is that they actually really love their country. They feel a deep sense of patriotism, and they love Viktor Orban. They really admire the way he's pushing back against the Euro-federalists in Brussels. And I think, personally, the observation that I make is that if you want to make Europe great again, we need to have leaders that are not afraid to speak out against the tyranny of Brussels. It doesn't make them popular, but it definitely will put their interest of their people at first. And that's definitely one way to make Europe great again. What is the best way to make Europe great again? And is there anything we can learn from Hungary to do?
Well, Hungary is a very strong nation fighting for its sovereignty. And this is what we should do in all the nation states. Of course, we can cooperate and work together within the European Union, but that doesn't mean that we have to give up our sovereignty to the bureaucrats in Brussels. So the fight for sovereignty, for a sovereign nation state, that's the most important thing to do, because that is who we are, that's our identity. It should not be taken over by the Brussels bureaucrats.
You made some incredible remarks during the panel that we just got to witness, and we've been talking about how the threat of losing our freedom to speech is really destroying Europe. But in your words, what do you think is the biggest threat that Europe is facing right now?
Well, to your point, being afraid of the citizens of Europe speaking their minds and sharing their views and expressing their religious views and the religious beliefs is there's no way that any civilization can survive if we're afraid of their own population and their ideas. People should be able to speak and share their views, think what they want to think, and debate ideas and figure out how to improve their society for the betterment of as many citizens as possible. So I think that's a key one, is the threat to free speech that you see all over the European Union and the United Kingdom as well. We saw it in the United States, and obviously it really ramped up during COVID and the aftermath, and Donald Trump being deplatformed and conservative voices being censored. So clearly, as an American, I'm a big fan of the First Amendment and think that any threats to free speech or freedom of religion are a major problem for any civilization.
I agree, because if you cannot have freedom of speech, you cannot criticize mass migration, the growing tyranny of the EU. We have lost, and this is something that you pointed out as well, we've lost pride for our heritage and our religion.
Sure. I mean, I think that, there's this view that if you express any admiration for your shared cultural heritage and your shared history, that you're somehow out of touch with, where the dominant elite wants you to go. But there should be nothing threatening about believing in your own country, believing and being proud of your history, proud of your heritage. And of course, listen, nobody's perfect. Every culture has seen some terrible tragedies and some terrible crimes, but you have to be able to discuss those things. You have to be able to figure out how to improve together as society and move forward for the betterment and the preservation of your culture.
I totally agree. And one of the reasons why we're here is to discover, like, how can we make Europe great again? Because we're so inspired by the Make America Great Again movement. It's been really leading the way for us as well to come back to common sense. Out of the sudden, we're talking about, how the European Commission is spending millions, if not billions, into NGOs, as we saw with Doge, for example. What can we learn from you? What can we do to make Europe great again?
Well, I think a big part of it is going to be courage. We've been very fortunate in the United States. I mean, President Trump displayed a tremendous amount of courage, first running for the first time in 2016, weathering unbelievable legal assault against him, and then an assassination attempt, and he never stopped. You're going to need people who display courage in order to speak common sense and fight for common European values, common national values, and speak up for the common people. And it's not just, leaders. It's also the citizens who are going to have to stand up and make their voice heard and not be afraid to be insulted. And in some cases, unfortunately, they'll be discriminated against because of their views. But without courage, we're cooked.
And as a senior advisor to President Donald Trump, if maybe some of our EU elite is watching this, what would you like to tell them? What should they be afraid? Are their days over?
Well, I'm always amazed at how many members of the European elite don't understand President Trump, or reflexively don't like his style, so they rebel against his message. When he talks about energy independence and the folly of depending just on either Russian gas supplies or solar, and how that's not going to lead towards a prosperous Europe. It's not going to lead toward prosperous nations in Europe. That's common sense. And that's an example of something that European elite leaders should have been listening to and paying attention to and not recoiling. I think President Trump wants to have great relationships with European leaders and European nations. All it takes is for Europe to meet him halfway. And I think that there's plenty of deals and cooperation to be found moving forward.
Yeah, we've seen this, for example, how he's dealing with Meloni. He invited her to the White House. They're now making another agreement. It's actually pushing other member states of the European Union as well to become more sovereign, something that we've been desperately wanting for a decade. So we really owe it a lot to President Donald Trump as well. So
he absolutely respects people who love their country, and he does not respect people who don't represent and fight for their own country.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great countries in Europe. They've been longtime allies of the United States, that we've worked together in a critical fashion, whether that be to save the free world from the First World War, the Second World War, to help bring freedom to hundreds of millions of people following the fall of the Iron Curtain. I mean, look exactly where we are in Hungary and the freedoms that people now have. As you talk about reversing things, where there have been essentially the Stalinist property grab here in Hungary, following the end of World War II. But now that with the fall of the Iron Curtain, we have freedoms here in Hungary that hadn't existed before. These are important allies. My concern, again, are the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels who pretend to make the decisions on behalf of sovereign people, on behalf of sovereign countries, that we need to find a way to work together better. And I think this is the reason why President Trump has been so aggressive. He realizes we have a finite time window to go and help get the EU back on course, to get some areas of commonality if we're going to maintain this special relationship, if we're going to maintain freedoms when it comes to the Western world. Obviously, that there is a counterbalance to people who do not believe in freedom, who believe in socialism and communism, or in the case of some of the unchecked migration, Islamism. We need to make sure the EU and the US have to have a good relationship. You'll see President Trump being not so shy about saying that he doesn't believe that many of the EU countries have upheld their end of the bargain when it comes to security type issues. But we're in this together. This is for the future and the fate of the Western world.